Good evening, everybody. My name is Shelly Cohen Konrad, and I am the director of the Center for Excellence in Collaborative Education, formerly the Interprofessional Education Collaborative. That's your formal announcement that we are the same thing, only growing. And our hope is that this is a perfect example tonight of collaboration, that we started with Bruce telling us, the president, about Patricia's work, and the president getting excited about it, and me connecting with Patricia, and then Kim Davis from the School of Social Work, whose passion is raising awareness about intimate partner violence, and then on and on and on. This sort of theory of telling and learning and with and from each other came to fruition tonight. So my only role here is as convener and thanker to everyone who's participated in bringing this together, and it is my deep pleasure to introduce our social work student, Kim Davis, who has done some remarkable work using the arts and communication and interprofessional working to raise awareness around intimate partner violence, and also working closely with Patricia, who she will introduce. So thank you so much for being here.
So thank you, Shelly. And we also want to say thank you to President Herbert and to the University of New England Center for Excellence in Collaborative Education for hosting this really empowering event. Thank you as well to the UNE Department of Intercultural Student Engagement for your sponsorship. We also want to thank the Maine Coalition to End Domestic Violence for their collaboration with Patricia in this work. And just on an administrative note, we will be doing a Q&A at the end, and if you stay where you are and raise your hand, someone will run a mic to you. So just wanted to make that point. Patricia McLean is a photojournalist, mother of two, grandmother of two, and the founder of Finding Our Voices. Prior to this work, her photojournalism was focused on breaking the stigma of people who were struggling with homelessness and mental illness. Her decision to turn her art to this cause occurred after her ex-husband's arrest became public, and women throughout her community began to reach out to her in whispers saying, "I've been there too." Finding Our Voices began 1 year ago, and the response has been incredible. The project had exhibits in Camden, Castine, North Haven, Islesboro, and the Augusta State House. And it was also at the Holocaust and Human Rights Center in Augusta for 3 months. There were slideshow presentations to a Rotary Club, a high school, a youth group, and Patricia furthered her work by facilitating 2 prison book clubs. She was the featured speaker at the U.S. State Department-sponsored global conference around gender-based violence, in a survivor webinar for the National Coalition to End Domestic Violence, and at an anniversary celebration of the largest domestic abuse advocacy center on Cape Cod. She was also named one of the 50 people creating a brighter future for the state by Maine Magazine. Patricia's exhibit and her story have been covered in numerous newspapers here and abroad, including the New York Times, the London Telegraph, and our very own Portland Press Herald and Maine Women's Magazine. She was included in 4 hour-long radio programs, plus Maine Calling, and was also on the TV show 207. The project began with 14 portraits a year ago, and now includes 21, 8 of which are here for you all to see this month, in addition to, of course, Patricia's. And there easily could be more. I also want to note that Finding Our Voices includes not only the women featured in the exhibit, but many, many others who have reached out to help, to support, and to encourage Patricia and this project. And in doing so, those women have found a space where they too are able to find their voices. The wisdom of what Patricia has to offer us tonight is not a wisdom that she invited into her life, and yet, selflessly, she offers it to us. Her insight and her willingness to be vulnerable is nothing short of astounding. And now that I'm done with the official introduction of Patricia, I want to tell you the even better part of my friend. She loves her sisterhood with a fierceness and an energy that is unmatched. She listens to survivors attentively, and she responds with an empathy that is healing. She creates community. She empowers women as they reclaim their voices and they walk toward freedom. She is constantly coming up with new creative ideas how to raise awareness about relationship abuse. I mean, I'm really not kidding. Like this morning, we thought we were getting ready for this, and the phone rings, and she's got another great idea. It's phenomenal. And she does this all as a survivor herself with all that entails. The last thing that I want to say is that domestic violence is a social issue. This is not a Patricia issue. This is not a Mary Lou issue. It's a you and a me issue. So with open minds and hearts, let us welcome my dear friend as she helps us understand how we can all step in and make our community healthier for all. Patricia McLean.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Kim is not only a wonderful friend to me, but also Finding Our Voices. She is going to be a board member of our nonprofit. We're going to become a nonprofit. And I just want to thank President Herbert, Bruce Brown, who brought this to President Herbert's attention, and everybody, Shelly right here, who made this happen, and Lori, who also made this happen. Diane, who hung the show. I mean, so many people. Thank you. And we also have Susan Giambalvo here, from Executive Director of Caring Unlimited. I just want to say if every Caring Unlimited or advocate, domestic abuse advocate, could maybe stand up so people can recognize who they are. And afterward, if anybody wants to talk, know who you can come to. Thank you. And I just want to add that in this project, I do refer to women as the victims and to men as the perpetrators. The percentage could be like 99% of women who are the victims, but there definitely are men who are victims, and there definitely are women who are abusers. But I'm just going to refer to it as the her and him in this project. I had just turned 27 and was a newspaper reporter in San Francisco. He was a famous singer coming through town. I interviewed him backstage. Before the evening was over, he told me he loved me and that he wanted to buy me a new car. That weekend, he flew me to his concerts in Kansas and North Carolina. Because he lived in New York, every day during the week, we would talk on the phone for hours. I laughed more in one weekend with him than I remembered laughing in many years before that. We were soulmates. He wanted only me. I had found my Prince Charming. Here are some of the red flags that existed then, but I did not see as red flags. He ordered double scotches on our first date, and he drank to that level every night, every day that we were together. He talked only about himself. He hated all the women in his life. He had endless grudges, including the manager who made him famous, his record companies, and his agents. He was estranged from every family member and had no friends. I was 14 years younger than him, but I was the youngest woman he had ever dated. I was the oldest woman he had ever dated. The oldest woman he had ever dated. And he moved very quickly to seal the deal. 2 months after we met, he was in my apartment while I put the final touches on preparations to move back east with him. I had packed all my belongings into 2 boxes. When I came back from my last day of work, the box that I wanted to take back with me was gone. That had every personal document memento that was important to me, my photos, my newspaper clippings, poems, stories. He said that he threw it away and that it was a mistake. That night, the moment when I had no car, no apartment, no job, with every meaningful document from my past in the dumpster, I saw his temper for the first time. What I remember is panic that he would leave me. The thought of having to start all over again was scary, but what scared me more was letting go of the dream. Amber Hatch is one of the survivors in our project, and her photo is in the other room. And she said about the time when her boyfriend first slapped her, then cried and said he had never done anything like that before. You know it, but you don't want to know it, because at that point, you're already fully invested. Dawn and I were married 5 months after we met. He called himself King, Boss, and Money Guy, and I thought he was joking. In 1994, I was setting the table for Thanksgiving. He made a suggestion. I said I had it all figured out. He got angry. His arguing made no sense. Anything I said to defend myself was a lever that would ramp up his rage. He shoved me, poked me, gripped me by my wrist, and really, really hard. And then, despite my effort to calm him down, the dreaded thing happened. The switch flipped, where there was no reaching him, and there was no turning back. His eyes turned black and beady and opaque. His body seemed to bulk up and harden. For hours on end, he punched me, kicked me, pulled my hair, strangled me, squeezed my skull between the palms of his hands until it felt like it would burst. He hurled verbal vomit at me, calling me Hebe, and phrases that I never thought a human being could speak. At the moment I thought he would kill me, I called 911. When they came to the door, I told them everything was okay. I begged them not to arrest him. I remember looking down the long staircase and an officer and he were talking. He was charming, the officer was charmed, no arrest was made. Afterward, Don told me that I had almost been arrested because he told them that I was the one who had attacked him. Instead of being grateful to me for protecting him from likely murder and an arrest, he never forgave me for making that 911 call. One of my favorite books is this one from 45 years ago. It's about a pimp named Silky and the 6 girls who work for him. Kitty says, I say to myself, Silky, the money I give you is what's making these things possible for me. But he puts it in my head that I can't make it without him. I'm really believing him. Lois says, he does let you speak freely to a certain extent until you start giving your opinions. Sandy says, now Silky doesn't have to tell me. If I have a problem, I think it out, his way. Silky says, styles have changed in pimping. You don't just leave a woman in a closet for 8 hours when she makes you mad. Modern pimps use psychiatry. Like Silky, Don knew that physically brutalizing me alone would not keep me captive. Like the modern pimps that Silky talks about, Don used psychiatry. And the psychiatry that Silky used and Don used are all on this wheel. The wheel was developed by a domestic abuse intervention program, and a variation is used for sex trafficking. When we have the misfortune to fall for an abusive partner, we think our love and lover is unique, but they're all the same. You can see that if you look at the power and control wheels that I ask the survivors in my project to customize. Some of them are out there in the hallway, and on our website, you'll see 21 of them. I've talked with a lot of women who have been in abusive relationships, and the victim or survivor is always a gentle, non-confrontational person who doesn't. The problem seems to be that she leads with her heart, and he has no heart. For me, it was all about keeping the peace. I am going to use the power and control wheel to show you some of the specific ways that he took advantage of my gentle nature and my not wanting any confrontation to terrorize me step by step and over 3 decades to gain and maintain power and control. And if you could look, I'll just say the headline, and then maybe you could just see it on here and try to read what it says on it underneath. Using intimidation, making her afraid by using looks, actions, and gestures. He would puff out his chest and ram me with it. He would back me up onto the bed and loom over me with a closed fist, hissing and yelling threats. He would say, "Don't get me started." Emotional abuse. The first day that I met him, I couldn't find my car in the vast parking lot, and forever after that, I was tagged as someone who was always losing things. He would call me stupid, dummy, and idiot, like an endearment very early on, and then it was the C word completely out of the blue. One time because I lowered the radio station volume, another time because I was just in the elevator with him as he came off stage. Isolation. He flew into a rage when I just mentioned visiting my family. The only guests at our wedding were his lawyer performing the ceremony and our property caretaker as a witness. When I was days from my due date with our first baby, he went out of town on a gig and gave me a phone number on a piece of paper that was a neighbor I had never met, and I was supposed to call her if I went into labor. I'm Jewish, and I had to send back a toy dreidel that a friend sent me for our baby, so I did not have any support of the Jewish community. I had to end complete contact with two of my closest friends. Minimizing, denying, blaming. All our fights were started because you are on the rag. He said it takes two to tango so often, I started to believe it. Male privilege. He would state, "I'm hungry," like I just heard my 2-year-old granddaughter say to my daughter. And then no matter what I was doing, I would have to make his meal, find out what he wanted to eat and make his meal for him. I would either have to bring it to him when he was lying in bed, or I would call him down. And it was always really nerve-wracking because I'd have to have it on the table hot as he rounded the corner. I had zero say in the decorating, furnishing, renovating, or buying of any of our 4 homes. Economic abuse. I was a portrait photographer for most of our marriage. One time I walked into a room and a client was leaving a message on the answering machine that he was hoping to have some prints made of from a photo session that I had taken of his son when he was a little boy, because now he was graduating high school. And before I could get to the phone, Don picked it up and told this man that I had thrown all the son's negatives into the garbage. When I left him at 55, I had 0 credit. Every single thing, including my car, was in his name. At about the 25th year of marriage, I asked him to invest the money that I had put aside for my photography business and an inheritance, and without consulting me, he put every penny into junk bonds, and 2/3 of my life savings were wiped out. In 2015, a year before our 30th wedding anniversary, I tried to leave him. All year, I would walk out of the house, and the minute that I opened the door to the hotel room, which was just about 5 minutes away, my phone would start dinging for about 150 voicemails a day he would leave me. The voicemails scared me, confused me, made me feel sorry for him, and made me believe that he really did love me. These voicemails that were left within seconds of each other and that I would get all day long. When his sobs and pleading didn't work, he turned from Jekyll to Hyde. The episode was a virtual carbon copy of what happened 20 years earlier. I barricaded myself behind the thick locked door of my bedroom bathroom with my cell phone. When I could hear the door cracking, I pressed the numbers 911, and when he crashed through it, I placed the call. The second the operator came on the line, he went from murderous rage to puppy dog. I told the operator who called back that everything was okay. I told the police officers who showed up that he hadn't hurt me and begged them not to arrest him. When the police asked if I wanted to fill out a police report, I said no. I was a classic domestic abuse victim who protects her abuser at any cost to herself. But 3 things happened to turn me around, probably save my life, and get me out. Jeffrey Boudreau was 24 and just out of police academy when he resisted the pressure from me and the "do you know who I am" pressure from Don. With the arrest came bail conditions of no contact. This gave me the space for the first time in my marriage to really think without him in my head. The worldwide headlines is the second thing that helped to free me, because my secret was outed in the most public way possible. I left the house and filed for divorce. The months after I filed for divorce were maybe even harder than the abuse through the marriage, as he acted out on his vow to be the nastiest bastard in the world to me, with the help of 5 lawyers. It didn't help that my own lawyer, who happens to practice in Biddeford, was more on my husband's side than his. When your husband is abusive and you are scoping out divorce lawyers, if your lawyer asks you at your first meeting, "Why did you stay?" walk out. The third and most important thing that freed me is breaking my silence. Every word spoken out loud to a friend, a family member, a domestic abuse victim advocate on the hotline or in person, and now as I speak publicly, is one word out of isolation and into sisterhood, one step out of darkness and into light, one step out of the fog and into clarity, one step out of shame and a step into strength. To anyone currently in an abusive relationship, even if you just feel something is wrong, because if you feel something is wrong, it probably is, I recommend starting with the domestic abuse agency in your area, and it's Caring Unlimited in our area, in this area here. Because they understand it, they will believe you, and they know how to keep you safe. Break the silence also if someone that you care about, you feel that they are in an abusive relationship, by letting that person know that you are there for them. And then call your local domestic abuse agency for more information on how you can help that person. My last bit of advice was written 170 years ago. It is still spot on. From Anne Bronte in her novel, Wilful Hall. First study, then approve, then love. Let your eyes be blind to all external attractions, your ears deaf to all the fascinations of flattery and light discourse. I'm really hoping that all these college students who are here tonight and maybe will be hearing this online will pay close attention to this, because if you can avoid, it is so much better than trying to get out. Anne Bronte continues, these are nothing, and worse than nothing, snares and wiles of the tempter to lure the thoughtless to their own destruction. If you should marry the handsomest and most accomplished and superficially agreeable man in the world, you little know the misery that would overwhelm you if, after all, you should find him to be a worthless reprobate. I am going to introduce you now to some of the 21 women who are in our project. From 18-year-old Hampshire college student Sydney from Camden, to 80 years young retired teacher Mary Lou, who's here tonight, from Scarborough, all proudly showing our faces, using our voices to say it is not our shame. It happens to strong, smart women. It has been going on for at least 170 years, and the time for it to stop is now.
We moved in really quickly together. Being a nurse, I had somebody to share some of my experiences with, because he was a paramedic firefighter, or he was an EMT firefighter. It was nice. He drove everywhere. I didn't have to worry about driving. He paid for the rent. I would catch him in small little lies, and that didn't even make sense of things to lie about. We went out one night in Portland, and I remember coming back and I was upset. He had made me really uncomfortable. He was flirtatious. He ended up shoving me in the bedroom with both of his hands hard enough to fall back onto the bed. I was kind of in shock, and I think I just made excuses because we had both been drinking, and I had upset him, and it was my fault. It wasn't all bad. Some days it was really, we had a lot of fun together. We laughed a lot, but then it kind of, the good days started fading, and there was more bad days than good. We were having intercourse, and I asked him to stop because it started to hurt, and he didn't. And he just kept going, and I was crying with my face down in the pillow and begging him to stop, and he didn't. And at the end, I said, why didn't you stop? Why did you do that? It hurt. And he looked right at me and said, I hate you. That was a hate fuck. I never pictured myself in a relationship like that. He was very big into working out. He made me feel like I needed to go to the gym every day. There were days that I went twice a day. I wasn't eating right. I was skin and bones. We had gone on vacation on a cruise. The whole week he was awful to me. We got arguing in our cabin, and he ended up getting me on the ground, face down. He was a big guy. he had his hand around my, it was kind of like wrapped around my face and my neck, and my head was turned to the side and I could not breathe. But I was able to just start screaming. I just was like, help, help, help. And not long after, maybe a minute or two after, I heard security pounding on the door. And he sat on the bed and he was rocking back and forth. And he goes, Liv, I'm sorry. I love you so much. I'm sorry. Tell them everything's fine. And I do remember saying to him, you don't do this to somebody you love. The punching in the face was bad, and the ripping my clothes and breaking my phone and pushing me and grabbing me, but that was probably the scariest thing I've ever experienced. I continued on the rest of the cruise, and it was kind of one of those things where it was like, I'm gonna walk on eggshells around him and make sure that we don't fight anymore, and try and just get off this boat alive. My parents begged me not to go on that cruise, and I went. And I remember when I got back, they said, we thought you were never going to come back. I still didn't leave. I still stayed. Because I kept thinking, things were going to get better. Things are going to get better when the kids come. Like, he's going to change. And never did. His mother had commented on a Facebook post of mine. He saw it and it set him off. And he said, delete that comment, delete the whole post. Or if you don't, I'm gonna take the credit card. I'm gonna take my car that your name's on. I didn't, and I said, no, I'm not gonna. He was like, well, then get the fuck out. And I said, okay. And I called my parents, and I said, I'm leaving. I'm done. We got my stuff the next morning, and we drove back up to Maine. I stayed at my aunt and uncle's in Rockland, and then we got on the boat the next day. And I just, the sense of relief, the weight I felt lifted off my shoulders. Thomas was always what I thought was colicky. And then I moved home. All of a sudden, they started sleeping better. It was almost like they were two just different kids. It's not the physical abuse I'm getting, it's the financial and the, emotional. I still feel like I'm just being walked all over sometimes.
That was Olivia. This is Becca.
He was a gentleman. He pulled a chair out. He opened doors. He paid for dinner, everything. He was a really sweet, nice guy. Girls had messaged me on Facebook. One girl said that she had been thrown into a car by him and punched in the face. In that first year, I didn't really believe that because he wasn't like that with me. It wasn't until we moved to Denver and I was away from everyone I knew that things took a turn for the worse. He didn't like my friends, and I thought, oh, he just really likes me. He wants to hang out with me instead of them. It started when he was drunk, and he threw a beer bottle at my head, and it missed my head and went into the wall. And then in the morning when he was sober, he apologized and patched the wall up. Actually, I patched the wall up. And then after that, it started with little slaps here and there, pinching, things like that. And then when he started getting drunk, he started punching me in the stomach. There's some days that were really good days, and you have fun with that person, and then they apologize, and nothing happens for 2 weeks, and they said that they were sorry, and you think that everything's going to be okay. And then it happens again. My mom had talked to me about it. She's like, never let yourself be in that situation. Don't ever let a man put you down. But when it happens so gradually, you don't even realize you're in that situation until you're like, oh shit. My mom was really sick, and I came home after she had brain surgery, and I had to be here and stay for a month to take care of her. And while I was here, he didn't want me to leave the house. He said I was going back for a reason and I wasn't allowed to see any of my friends. He would call me at any point and say, take a picture of where you are right now and send it to me so I know exactly where you are. I was pissed off and really frustrated with the situation, but it was more just, I didn't want him to be angry. I didn't want to have a fight about it. So it was easier just to do what he asked. Growing up, I left home and I went sailing, and I traveled around the world as a chef and as a nanny. it was really weird having somebody tell me what to do, like, all the time. I stopped smiling. I had my head down all the time, looking at the ground. It'd be like somebody coming in through the door at a restaurant. Why are you looking up? Why are you looking at that person? I just became much more serious. And we got a dog together, and he started being abusive towards the dog. That's when I really realized that this isn't supposed to be happening. I actually one night grabbed a kitchen knife when he was hitting me and put it to his throat. And I said, if you ever touch me again, I'm going to leave you. It was like a few days later, he grabbed me and threw me up against a wall and choked me and punched me in the stomach. And the next morning, I dropped him off at work. I went home, packed up everything I could fit into our mutual car, put the dog in the front seat, and drove away.
I'm from...
And this is Sydney she's a Hampshire College student.
I met him in
18.
high school. I had recently been broken up with by a girl that I was dating, and I was feeling not so great about myself. I had quite a few platonic male friends. He pretty quickly got really uncomfortable with it. He would text me a lot when I was with them, saying that it was making him uncomfortable and that I probably shouldn't be spending time with them alone. And even though at first it didn't seem like it was a problem to me, it started to seem to me like it was a problem as soon as he started to tell me that it was a problem. And I guess a couple months into our relationship, I had gone on a field trip for school, and there was a dance with students from other schools, and for a while I was sort of dancing near this one guy from another school. I kind of started to think about what he might think of that, and I started to feel really guilty about it. And so I texted him, and I was like, just so you know, like, I sort of danced with this guy on this field trip. And I was like, I hope it's not a big deal. Like, I really didn't have any bad intentions, but like, if you have a problem with it, like, we can talk about it. And I'm sorry, and like, I won't do it again. And he called me and he got really mad. He hung up on me, and I really felt like I had done this really horrible, awful thing. And one of the biggest negative components of our relationship was the sexual aspect. And he would ask me to have sex, and I would say, I don't really feel like doing it right now. And he would do a lot of, if you don't want to have sex with me, you don't love me, you're punishing me, you're mad at me. You don't think I'm attractive. If you want me to like date you and be faithful to you, like, you should have sex with me. Like, so, I would say no, and 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 then I would say yes. Physically, it would oftentimes be pretty uncomfortable, sometimes painful, and I felt very, very pressured into having sex in the first place, and then continuing to have this uncomfortable kind of painful sex with him. I spent a lot of my time that I probably could have been focusing on school or on other relationships, friendships, or on myself, focusing on him and his various problems with his family and his yada yada. He actually broke up with me. I cried and cried and cried, and I was like really, really upset for like 27, 30 hours, and then I was fine. This group called New Hope for Women came to my school and did a presentation on relationship and domestic abuse. I guess I just figured that relationship abuse and domestic violence was for like married people, and domestic partnerships where you live with somebody, or maybe you have kids, or financially there's some reason you can't leave. And I assumed it would look more like outright physical beatings and rapes and threats and stalking and things like that. I didn't understand, I guess, how subtle it could be.
And these three ladies with their voices and their power and control wheels are on the website findingourvoices.net, along with 17 other women in our project. If there's anyone here who wants to join us finding our voices and speaking out to help others avoid, recognize, safely leave, or heal from intimate partner abuse, with projects coming up like a film festival we're going to do this year and a podcast, please get in touch. There's a lot to do behind the scenes if you don't feel ready or would rather not go public with your story. I'm going to introduce you now to a very special person in the audience, Mary Lou. Well, first we're going to have Mary Lou, and then I'm going to bring Anna up. And it's really hard to believe that I've only known Mary Lou for a year, but she is a sister to me now, like I feel Kim is. And here's Mary Lou. Her photo and voice is in the wall in the exhibit, and she's in our project. And here's Mary Lou.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, so Patricia asked me if I would say just a few words. That's all, a few words before the questioning and answering period, okay? Thank you for coming to share our journey to break the silence of domestic violence. I am an 80-year-old survivor and a part of the Family Finding Our Voices project. I left my abuser 15 years ago at the age of 65. My therapist once said to me, "You have the opportunity to rewrite your story. Many victims never get that chance." Sharing my story is a way of paying it forward for the love and support I've received during the past 15 years. Is this going okay? Yes. Is it? Okay. Domestic violence. Okay, did I forget? Okay. I have shown my video and spoken at UNE Dental School in Portland through these doors. It was an amazing and positive experience. I am humbled and grateful to be at the Biddeford campus tonight. And I remember the first time Karen Wentworth and I went to UNE, it was like, they kind of looked like, what's this old lady and what's she going to tell us? And it was so amazing when it was over. There were hugs, and they were asking me if they could share their video with their mother so that they could see what their sister is going through. And so I have later in here, it's ageless. Domestic violence affects many people along with its victims. My granddaughters, who went to the University of New Hampshire and Orono at the time, showed my video and told their friends my story. Domestic violence is ageless. My granddaughters supported their friends who were experiencing abuse from a boyfriend or partner and would add, "Didn't you watch my grandmother's video?" It's like, okay, you saw it's out there. You need to do something. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect. My prayer is that we touch the lives of people we may never meet who leave abusive relationships after hearing our stories. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anna, and I'm an advocate at Caring Unlimited. I want to speak to anyone that we know that so many of us are impacted by this issue, whether it's through our own experience or through the experiences of people we love. So I want us all to remember that this can and does happen, as is shared so powerfully through Patricia and the many survivors who came forward in this exhibit, that this can and does happen to anyone. That having the huge misfortune of falling in love with someone who can seem wonderful and charming and kind, and who gradually and slowly starts to use coercive, controlling, and sometimes violent behaviors towards you, can happen to anyone. But we want you to know that you're not alone. At Caring Unlimited, we have a 24/7 helpline that is here literally all the time to listen, to believe, to help you explore your options. We're not here to tell anyone what to do. We're here to help people know what their rights are, be able to plan for their safety, know what options are going to work for them, and then move forward to be as safe as possible, whether they find that they want to stay in the relationship or are trying to leave the relationship. We're here to help people plan wherever they're at in their journey to be as safe as possible and to know more about their rights. So please know you're not alone. We're here with free confidential help 24/7, anytime. We want our community to know that no one is in this alone. No one deserves to be abused, and we're here for you. And as well, we have many services beyond just our helpline of shelter, legal services, many other programs folks can get involved with. And one of my very favorites that I want to highlight in the theme of this evening of finding our voices is the weekly support groups that happen throughout York County, and one that happens right here in Biddeford. It's an amazing opportunity for individuals who've experienced intimate partner abuse and violence to come together as they find their voices in community together. That those messages that it's your fault, this isn't really abuse, somehow you caused this, can be so insidious. And in the context of our support groups, it's an amazing opportunity for folks to come together and know the person sitting across from me didn't deserve this horrific experience of abuse at the hands of someone who said they love them, who they love. And maybe that's true for me. The resilience and joy of knowing you're not alone and that healing is possible is here. Know you're not alone. Know that there's plenty more information about Caring Unlimited services at the back information table. And thank you again for being here, for bearing witness to the stories of survivors this evening. Know that our helpline is here for anyone impacted by abuse, including friends and family members. As we bear witness to these stories, please don't hesitate to reach out to our helpline in the days and weeks to follow as this event lingers in our minds and we hold space for the important stories of trauma and abuse and the stories of resilience and healing that have been shared here tonight. Thank you.
I just want to add that people don't realize that the 24-hour hotline of the domestic abuse victim agencies, it's not just when you're going through it or when you've just gone through it. Even like 2 years after my divorce, I just found it so helpful to call them and just sometimes just to vent or just a lot going on in my mind. I just wanted to be able to just talk it out. So even if it's been 20 years that you've been through it, they're there for you. And I just wanted to make sure before I open to question and answers that I didn't shortchange thanking anybody. I wanted to say Shelly's full name is Shelly Cohen Konrad, and she allowed this to happen. Michelle Cote, who was the point person from a lot of points, and truly a delight to work with, as everyone was here. And Lee Cote and Dave Diego, who helped a lot with the slideshow, and I'm really happy to see Lori Powers here because she was in the first meeting. And what I'm going to do now is open up for question and answers. And I just want everyone to know that ask anything at all you want, anything. And if we can answer it, we will, to any of us three.
Hi. Hello, everybody. My name is Christian Oliver from the UNE Portland campus, College of Pharmacy. First of all, I want to say what you guys are doing here is amazing. I came from a long line of very strong women in my family, raised by two women my whole life, and they were always telling me stories about abuse, whether it was other females or males or however the relationships are going. And I don't think it's in my DNA to do anything but respect women, because I always feel that pressure of saying one wrong word. But I guess my question would be, I have a lot of my female friends that have come to me, and I can identify that they're in some type of abusive relationship, and I guess I never really know exactly what to kind of tell them. And so coming from women who either have been, you've heard other women's stories or have been in the relationship yourself, what is something that I could do as a friend that could kind of hopefully help them, not go through a couple decades of abuse?
Thank you for asking that. I'll answer and we can take the microphone. I think the longer I'm sort of thinking about this issue, the more I kind of think of it like being in a cult and being brainwashed. And I think that if you as a friend could understand, if it's been going on for a little while, that the woman, there might be a fog, she might be in a mind fog because that's what he's done to her. So the worst thing to do is to be impatient or to judge. And the best thing, I think, is to just be solid as a friend, and maybe also mention, like if you see that you don't like the way someone is treating her, to call that out to her or to the person who's abusing. And then just let the person know that you're there for them if they ever want to talk. And then I think that's my advice, and we'll move down the road.
I would say whenever, both as an advocate and in my personal relationships, that labels can be really scary for folks. And so when I'm working with someone or concerned about a loved one and concerned about their intimate partner's behavior towards them, instead of kind of jumping in with, I think you're in an abusive relationship, really naming behaviors, letting them know it sounds like you don't feel heard or you sometimes feel intimidated, really naming some of the specific things that I've seen or that they've told me about that have caused fear in the relationship, that have made them feel like it's not safe for them to make their own choices in the relationship. And letting them know, I care about you, I'm concerned about you, no one deserves this. So maybe kind of avoiding those labels, but naming those behaviors and letting them know, no one deserves to be treated that way. And I'm worried about you and I care about you. And I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I want you to know you're not alone. I'm here to listen. What would help you feel supported? What can I do to help you? Just that question of what can I do? Putting the power back in their hands when so much power and choice has been taken away from them through their partner's behavior can be so, so crucial. And then as a DV advocate, can't help, always have to plug, know that other help is available too, and letting them know that. Kind of so many people, when they think of domestic violence resource centers, they think just of shelters and, oh, well, I don't know if I want to leave. I don't know if I want to break up with my partner. Letting them know that we're not here to tell them what to do. We're here to listen and help them explore their options can be a crucial step too. So thank you for that fantastic question.
I just want to add that one of the main things that happens is isolation, and a lot of women tell me that it's sort of like a vicious circle because he isolates her, and then her family might get fed up with her. So she keeps going back. So she kind of feels like she can't go back. So she's thrown in with him more. So I really feel like being there for her is really important. Any other questions? Yes.
So what about agencies that will advocate for the children once you do get out, and the courts don't seem to see that it carries on to the children as well? You could have a protection from abuse order for yourself and the children, and then the courts say, okay, well, they kind of put that to the side and say, we want contact, and are to force the children to have contact when there's actually criminal behavior.
It's so horrible, and that's one of the things that I'm just trying to figure out also how we can get that changed. I've talked to, we have some district attorney, people from the district attorney's office in the room, but I hear that there's that they're not connected, the criminal court and the family court, but that seems so wrong, because if the guy is abusing the woman, he's also abusing the children, and I think that's a serious problem, but maybe you have some solution.
Is there anything you want to add, Marianne? I would share, we hear this kind of heartbreaking quandary that so many survivors are in, that they are concerned for their own safety, they're concerned for the safety of the children, and for many survivors, they hear the question of, well, why didn't you leave? And for many folks, I was concerned about the safety of my children, and I wanted to be the buffer to keep my children safe. So we want people to know that at Caring Unlimited, not only do we provide advocacy to individuals experiencing abuse, but we also have a parent support coordinator with fantastic activities and groups, and specifically provide support to help parents repair that relationship that often the intimate partner is trying to undermine, the healthy relationship between the survivor and the children, as well as often using the threat of Child Protective Services involvement and court involvement against the victim, survivor, parent. And so we have a Child Protective Services liaison at Caring Unlimited, as well as free legal supports, and really try and do everything we can to provide some wraparound supports to provide safety not only for that individual, but as they're also safety planning for their children. Yeah.
You know, on a different frame, but still, and I wrote in my little speech that, you know, domestic violence affects everyone in the family. And so I had 4 children, and we're living in the 60s and the 70s where nobody knew what was going on. And so one of my oldest son became very successful, and but he became an alcoholic, a drug addict, and gambling, all high end. And so he's been clean for 11 years, and now he is out there telling his story of what happened in our family. And then, and he's doing it on Facebook, and so then I knew, and him and I the one thing that happened is I took responsibility. I knew I wasn't there, but I also knew I was living in fear, control, and denial. And so now my son and I are working together on Facebook. And it's kind of an amazing effect that it has, that I was feeling embarrassed by his story. And then I talked to Patricia, I remember one day, and I said, I'm thinking of writing something. And she said, go for it. So I did write something. I sent it to my son, and he said, Mom, that's incredible. Go for it. And then I have a son that doesn't have anything to do with me because I ruined their father's good name. And my youngest son is married and has all kinds of mental health issues. And then the worst story that happened with my oldest daughter, and that wasn't the result of domestic violence, but it influenced it. She was never lived up to her father's expectations. And 5 years ago, the end of March, she committed suicide. And she always wanted a father. I want to preface that. It wasn't the only reason, but it certainly was part of the not living up to the expectation and just the suffering that she had living in an abusive family.
Is there any other questions?
I do. How are you able to speak publicly without, like you say, the 5 attorneys that your husband?
Well, it's kind of interesting because in my divorce settlement, I'm not allowed to write about him for publication. I was under a lot of pressure, and I ended up signing that. But I can speak. And I can speak, and thank God for that, because he tried really, really hard to include a full clamp down on me, an NDA, so I would never be able to even talk about him. And that would have extended even, oh my God, and I thought later, like, if I had done that, if I had agreed to that, I really think I would have died. Like, I would have killed myself, I think. I mean, I just couldn't imagine living without being silenced for 29 years and then continuing to have to be silent, and also having him watching, making sure I didn't say one word and pouncing on me if I did. So I have the truth on my side, and truth is the best defense, and free speech, and I can speak.
Hi, I'm Shira Burns, Assistant District Attorney here in York County. I'm a domestic violence prosecutor. And listening to your story, I hear it almost every day about how you came into the legal system a long time ago, calling 911, law enforcement coming and saying nothing happened, and then way down the road, calling 911 again, and finally looks like charges were brought. Is there anything that law enforcement or the criminal justice system could have done differently the first time to hold him accountable, or to help you safely leave at that time?
The arrest. If they had arrested him, it might have been different. I might have left. They didn't. They left and they didn't arrest him, and I was there for another 20 years. But the other thing I'd like to say about what wasn't done right is, there's photos of the bruises. There's a photo of the door that he broke down. I was willing to testify, and he got a plea deal, which the DA in my district now told me was a sweetheart deal, where he got no jail time. They told me that it was a first offender. That's another thing. If someone's arrested for domestic violence and they've been married 29 years, it's not a first offense. I think that should be struck. If there's a domestic, I don't think they should be ever considered a first offender. And so they said the judge wasn't going to put him in jail, and I was put under a lot of pressure to agree to the terms of this. He ended up getting, for everything that he did to me, which was, holding me captive for 4 hours, terrorizing me for hours, on and on, plus the 29. Anyway, he got no jail time, a fine of about $3,000, no batteries intervention, and the deferred deposition, where after 2 years the domestic violence charge was dropped. And that's the other thing that I really want to change. Deferred deposition has no place in domestic violence. And what these guys do, what he did, is 2 years after I kind of went along with the settlement, because I thought, well, at least he's pleading guilty. Like, he was denying it the whole time. So it was amazing to me that he was going to plead guilty. So he pled guilty to 5 counts in open court. And to me, that I got a lot of satisfaction out of that. And then after the 2-year deferred deposition was up, came out of the courtroom, and his lawyer, Walt McKee, says that the charge was dismissed. That means he proving that he's innocent. He never did it. And I went to the district attorney. I was in such a state. I was so, I just felt so abused all over by that. And I said, you've got to put a clarification out. And they refused to do it. So that the deferred deposition is a big thing for me. But do you feel that there's anything that you, that was not done?
No.
Police or anything that you?
Well, the day I left, 2 days before I left, no, I really, I didn't have a lot to do with the police because I didn't tell anybody. But I know one point, it was a Christmas night, and we had a place on Sebago Lake, and we were there for Christmas, and he put a gun to one of my son's heads. And so my son left immediately, and I called the family doctor. Because I was protecting his good name. You hear these horrible stories, and you wonder, why did they act that way? So I called, and the doctor was part of the old boys club. And so he said, what I want you to do, Mary Lou, is take your 3 kids and my Alzheimer mother and go back to Scarborough and then come back and be with Charlie. Now, that was a doctor. So this time, when he threatened me with a gun, I had attempted suicide, which I didn't finish, thank God. And I told him about it, and he took out a gun, and he said, I'll show you how to be successful committing suicide. And again, I didn't call the police. But finally, my daughter called, and they took the guns out of the house. I just kind of try to step back from it all in fear and control and denial, so I didn't really have any problem.
Well, that's the thing, is when a victim is willing to testify like I was, I just don't understand why they would let him off, because they always put it on the victim by saying that they recant and they don't testify, and that's why there's no prosecutions. So when the victim is willing to testify, they really should try really hard to prosecute. Put the guys away when they can.
Hi, I just want to say thank you, first of all. But my question was, you mentioned that you were previously a part of the Jewish community, and I wanted to know how they reacted, or if they reached out to you or any of that after all of this became public.
Well, maybe only because my show was at the Holocaust and Human Rights Center, so that was a link right there. Another sweet thing that happened is, this is the other thing that I wanted to kind of mention, is after my husband was arrested for domestic violence and then more charges were added, he kept getting bookings, and and then I got this, just something popped up in someone sent this to me, that there were a group of students a month after his arrest, and they were from Cape Cod, high school students, and he was supposed to appear at their high school, and a group of students got together and they said, no, he's not a good role model, we don't want him here. And the head of the high school superintendent said, well, look, that's fine, I'm glad you're doing this, but it's too late, we have a contract, we can't break the contract. And they said, no, we're not gonna stop, and we're gonna keep protesting, the protest is gonna get bigger. And they ended up, these boys were part of something called the White Ribbon Society, which is boys who help to keep, what is the White Ribbon Society? It's
an anti-violence movement and awareness.
of boys, yeah. I think it started in Australia, maybe. And on White Ribbon Day in Cape Cod, they were able to announce that they had that the show was canceled. So this agency, I ended up getting in touch with the domestic abuse agency from this high school, and they invited me to be the speaker at their 40th anniversary. And Jack, the 17-year-old boy who had started this protest, was there at that day. And they had heard what happened with dreidel, and they gave me a gift, and it was a dreidel. Yeah. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight, and Mary Lou, thank you, and thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. And again, if I can just add to that as well, we see so much as far as the isolation piece, isolating folks from their faith community, from their friends. And I just love that story you shared, because if we really want to see change in our communities, it has to start with accountability. It has to start with our communities shifting the question from, well, why did this individual survivor not leave the person who was abusing them? Or why won't they testify, when it can be terrorizing, it can be life-threatening for them, it can actually make situations more scary in the short term. But I just feel so hopeful with examples like that if we can hold the individuals who are choosing to behave in harmful and abusive ways accountable, and change our culture so that people know that violence is never acceptable, and that people who behave in violent ways, that we're not going to lift them up as role models. That's when you can make real change. So, and it all starts with conversations like this. So I just want to say thank you so much, Patricia and Mary Lou, for sharing your stories and being here tonight.
Thank you. Yeah. And I appreciate being here too. Thank you.